A security breach can come from many places inside and outside your company. Almost half are a result of lost or stolen laptops and PDAs. Another culprit? Employees who steal or misuse records. And when it comes to identity theft, Privacy Rights Clearinghouse says that dishonest employees perpetrate more than half of all incidents. What should you do if you suspect one of your employees is stealing data? Here to help answer that question is Danica Davis, Executive Director and CEO of the Northern California Human Resources Association. Danica, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
How do you address theft from employees?
Well, I think that it's really a three-part process, and it begins with the hire. That you got to bring ethical people into your organization that aren't likely to do those types of things. So from the very beginnings, when you're in the interview process, you're asking questions that elicit the characteristics of honesty, integrity, avoiding folks who want to tell you a whole bunch of things you shouldn't know about their past employer. That's not somebody that you probably want to bring into your group either. You want to put it right in the application process, that you're going to do background checks. Hopefully these folks that are inclined to malfeasance will just self-select out when they see that you're going to check their references, their criminal record, their credit history if it's appropriate for the position.
Now, our audience are small to medium business companies, and for them, a lot of times when they try to grow their business, they might have to hire freelancers, right?
One route you could take is to get your freelancers through one source, and then you contract with that entity to do this type of work for you. So you've got a ready cache of folks that you already know have had these kind of background checks.
Now you've got a problem on your hand. Uh-oh, we think so-and-so is stealing or they're doing some espionage within the company. How do you address that? What's the next step?
Well, the next step when you think you already have a problem is really to look at the level of risk you think you have. What was taken? How certain are you that this person did it, this department did it, this is how the information came out of your organization? And I think your response is going to be tempered by the answer to each of those questions. The first part is in the employment relationship, you really have to presume innocence. You know, you're not looking for who broke the law here. We're employers. We're not law enforcement officers. What we're looking to see is, did they violate our policies? Because employers have a right to enforce their own policies.
Obviously, if you want to do some type of investigation of an employee, there's a lot of concerns about doing that correctly so you don't violate their rights, damage their reputation, because it's got to be hard to be 100% certain. Do you have some practical tips on a way to approach this, both internally and maybe with a third party?
Sure. The first step is to realize it's an investigation and not an inquisition. You're coming in to ask them what has happened, given that you have this piece of evidence that something has happened. At the same time, you need to make sure you lock down their access while you're doing this investigation. If it is that individual, you don't want more going out the door. But there's several considerations. First, if you're represented by a collective bargaining agreement, there are certain provisions you have to follow. Weingarten rights. When you're doing an investigation of an individual, they're allowed to have representation present. If they're not a union-covered employee, a collective bargaining-covered employee, they can't have counsel there. That's a common misconception. Oh, I can bring my lawyer in because my employer is asking me questions. A practical application might be that you have a suspicion that somebody has breached security, and you ask to talk with them. You don't march them out in front of all of their peers. Make it convenient. You know, can I see you for a moment? That's all it really needs to be. Real subtle, that we have a reason to believe that we've had a breach of security. There is some evidence that suggests it was from your computer on your shift, on whatever the reason is you believe it to be centered around this individual, and ask a series of questions that leads to a conclusion, rather than starting with, we know you did this and we're going to prove it while you're in this room. You can't even block the access to the door, because then you could be accused of false imprisonment. So when you're in those types of situations, you always have to think of what is going to be most favorable to the employee.
And cooler heads really have to prevail.
Absolutely.
In a small company where it's very personal to somebody, you could see where an owner of a company could get very upset.
So if you know you're that type of individual, don't do it yourself. There are several options available to you. If you have a human resource professional, they're usually used to handling things with neutrality, confidentiality. They make good witnesses when they're put on the stand. If you know that you don't have an HR person and you're not the right person to do that investigation, you can use outside counsel. Your regular lawyer can handle that for you. You can also use private investigators. That's a new thing we're seeing in the practice of human resources, is companies hiring a private investigator to do these types of investigations.
How do you keep a positive culture without people getting, I guess, paranoid about what's happening within a company? Keep that culture of security, but keep everybody, happy and going forward.
I think it's all about messaging. And oftentimes as employers, we don't tell folks why we have these policies, which is just a fancy word for rules. And so folks come in, we don't treat them with respect and say, we have this very elaborate security policy because we hold the security of our employees and our customers' data sacrosanct.
Right.
So this is how we're going to respond if we believe that there's any breach. And that's for the good of this entire organization. So it's about framing the issue from the very beginning, that this is a company that values security.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us, Danica. It's been great to have you.
Thank you, Rick.